Starting your own practice is hard for many chiropractors. It's riddled with both struggles and successes. But here at the Chiropractic Philanthropist, we make it easy by having chiropreneurs and entrepreneurs share their struggles and lessons learned in life and business so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. And now here's your host, Dr. Ed Osborne.
How much better would your life be if you could practice by choice because you had multiple passive streams of income supporting you? Go to moneyripples.com or find their podcast, The Chris Miles Money Show, to learn more. Wow, I'm like really excited to actually speak. How long has it been, Dr. Fletcher, since you and I have been on one of these types of calls, interviews? I know I've interviewed you twice on TCP. This is a third. I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone 3 times.
Well, I have to say that just looking back on the history, Dr. Ed, was that I really caught the notion of you doing podcasts. So if we take a look back and when you were originally, describing chiropractors and podcasting, I would say, what would that be? At least 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago.
Oh yeah, maybe longer.
Very early. And I was so enthralled by the level of ingenuity and the degree of intention that you were putting out. You and I didn't know each other specifically, being Canadian chiropractors. You would think that we'd have crossed paths sometime earlier. But anyhow, it was one of those really interesting moments because we kind of struck up this really easy relationship at that moment. And I have been so impressed and so enthralled with the path that you've taken that it just was natural for us to continue along that way.
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, I have to say, you were one of the first believers and supporters in the TCP podcast, the Chiropractic Philanthropist. You saw the bigger vision where everyone else was like, where are you going with this? And you're
well, I wish I could pick stocks as well as I picked that one.
Yeah, exactly. Although pretty much anything in the stock market right now, you're okay.
Exactly.
So here's something that I didn't know. And so you and I off recording actually told me a story. And this is a story from back when you practiced and started practice in Alberta. So, I mean, for our listeners on TCP podcasts, normally what I do, and this is the 3rd time we've had you on. So normally what I do is I just have you kind of share about yourself, but I would love to actually hear this story, and we'll get into this story because I thought it was so great. And it gives people a little bit of insight as to, who Dr. David Fletcher is.
Well, I'm like you, a CMCC grad, and I was born and raised in Winnipeg. So the good news is that I bypassed moving from Toronto to Winnipeg and get right out to Alberta. But everything I owned was in the trunk of a car. And I say that because I think that many of our listeners can relate to the fact that, you start with nothing but a really good idea and a great intention. I love the idea that I was a chiropractor, but I had very limited skills. But what was interesting was we were in the midst of this terrible recession that was going on, and banks were withholding any funding or anything else. And so literally, there was this, I could afford at that time, I think a set of business cards, and that was my marketing budget. And I had remembered going to a Parker early on, and Parker had this acronym that was WOC, which was whip out cards. And so I remember I visited a friend in Red Deer, and as a result of that, and this, I know that you couldn't make this stuff up, but my car was breaking down and I didn't really have a whole bunch of places to go. And so I ended up driving to this kind of resorty town, which is called Sylvan Lake. And if anybody is from Central Alberta, they know that it punches way above its weight class. It's really a lovely spot, but it's 3,500 people when I was there. And so I realized they had no chiropractor and I wanted to get open. And so I remember going around and there was no leasable space at that moment. And I thought, well, I got to do something. So I had business cards in my hand and they didn't have any address on them. They just said that there was a chiropractor in town. And so I started dropping these things off. And I realized with some, people were getting back to me that I had to find a location. And so I was driving around in this beat up old car I had, and I realized that there was the Lakeview Motel, which, as you can only imagine what it was like. Remember the word motel there. And so I went in and I said, hey, do you rent rooms by the hour? And that, of course, raises a few eyebrows, you know, as you can well appreciate. And they said, what are you? And I said, well, I'm a chiropractor, and I wanted to, you know, take it on Tuesday and Thursdays in the evenings and see if we could go. And wonderfully, they said yes. And so I began my first practice, if you would, in room 217 of the Lakeview Hotel.
217, you know the number.
I do. And I pushed the bed against the wall, and I had a portable table, and the word started getting out. And as the word started getting out that there was a chiropractor in town, and just to be clear, it wasn't like it was in the middle of nowhere. Red Deer is legendary for its phenomenal chiropractic, to the point where Sigafus did the Red Deer tapes. And so only 11 miles down the road, there were like 40 chiropractors who were unbelievably great friends of mine and great chiropractors. But we put on this effort of where we wanted to be different, we wanted to be dynamic, and we wanted to talk chiropractic. You know, like we wanted to go out there and mention the bigness of life, not just the bigness of spinal care. And the words started to come out, and I started to get a flow going. And I'll just tweak the fact that we got so darn busy on Tuesday and Thursday nights. I put the we in there because that was me in my bed. But we got going so busy in there that I had to have an organizing system, Ed, to keep it there. And I came up with this you know, visionary approach of having a deck of cards, of where I would stack them in their suits. And so the suits would be staggered, and then we would do it. So there was clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds, and at the top would be the Queen of Hearts or King of Hearts, whatever it was. And I would hand that to my first CA, which was the front desk receptionist in the Lakeview Motel. And I said, hey, if somebody wants to go up to room 217, hand them a card. And so that was my tracking system. And I'd finish adjusting somebody, they'd walk out, and I'd go, okay, Queen of Spades. And the person who was sitting, they used to honestly line the hallways with their folding, you know, those lawn chairs that were folding?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they'd bring those with them and park them on the second floor of this thing.
That's anyhow, a great idea. People should do
it was brilliant. And honestly, I found a space in the Parkland Credit Union building as I was doing this. You know, a second floor walk up. And if there's any story that I can sort of, you know, leverage to tell about somebody, you can hear from it. There was need, there was innovation, there was, you know, fearlessness. I was scared stiff, you know, honestly, doing this, regulatory and everything else that was going on. And I just thought, you know what, my vision is bigger than their intention to whack me. So I'm just going to carry on. And, you know, I think that lesson that I learned in those early days, you know, because it really was a time of survival, has really positioned me to, you know, look at things like CLA and look at things like my practice for so many years as being one of those extensions of how fearless are you, mm-hmm. how capable are you, and how committed are you? And that's been my path.
Yeah. I'm getting tired of everyone talking about this being unprecedented, what we're going through right now, because, you know, when you think about it, yes, it is, you know, it sucks like in many different ways, but we all have these ups and downs in practice. If you've been doing this, anything from like 10 to 20 years, this happens. Like we weather the storm, as you could say, right? Like we thrive.
Well, there's no question that, you know, obviously when we made the decision, let's step it back. You know, whether it was me driving to Sylvan Lake or yourself starting at Edmonton, or, you know, transforming, you now have, you know, your laptop lifestyle models, and I have CLA and everything else. We're chiropractors. And when we got into this for, you know, to not find a way out of it. And as a result of that, you recognize that the economies of the world go in hiccups. But, you know, for every yin, there's a yang. And the realities are, this is a big one. Like, I don't want to, you know, diminish that whole thing. No. But I've been through recessions. You know, I think one of the biggest things that happened in the Canadian space where we were was the Stroke Consortium came out and almost shut down all of chiropractic at that time. And we're strong and we weather it. And if I can take anything away, you know, CLA has a world presence. So I'm constantly having continuous feedback from Europe, from Asia, from Australia, New Zealand, and everything else. There is a sense of certainty that we're going to come out of this in an even stronger position, because chiropractors are eternally hopeful and capable.
I mean, and you're talking, you have a really good gauge temperature of the mindset of a lot of doctors right now, both in Canada and the States. But I mean, even the docs who are hyper successful and they're doing really well, what do you find, like, if you're talking to them, what's what's the common thread, or what's on their mind right now, moving as we kind of like the lights come back on and, the dust is settling?
Well, I find it fascinating because I really see, whether I really see honest mentorship coming for those of us who have been super successful. There is a genuine caring to make sure that we don't have too much roadkill. So I'm genuinely thrilled with that. Associations that matter are stepping up, and friends are stepping up, and there's a real community of caring that I see. So that's enthralling, and I see that everywhere across the board. The second is that I see that the super successful, the ultra successful ones are recognizing that, you know what, it's a blip on the lifelong radar, that this is not going to be a death strike that's going to happen. And they, this too shall pass. And, they have prepared themselves both economically and otherwise. Fascinatingly. And this is, again, the people who have embraced, our vision through CLA, my vision through leadership and otherwise, that we've always been promoting this idea of the potential and the lifelong care model. And what we mean by lifelong care is chiropractic is an essential service so far beyond, musculoskeletal. Those doctors are only, who are allowed to practice appropriately, are only seeing somewhere between a 20 or 25% reduction in their flow. And the comment back to me, Dr. Ed, is that they keep saying, I'm so glad that I prepared myself this way. I think that the sad part are the ones who have taken on a lot of risk economically and did not prepare themselves. And I think that this too shall pass if they get back into practice pretty quick. The one thing that I will say that I am certain about is that people that were under care are dying literally, but striving to get back in care. Exactly. When the doors open again, it's not like starting fresh again. It's going to be connecting and reconnecting. That's
exactly what I'm hearing. States, or, it's the practices down in the States. And I, cause I speak to a lot of the, chiropractic personalities, management coaches, and you do interviews and things like that. And that's exactly what they're saying is like, it's the docs who have really spent the time to educate and to continue to educate their, practice members, patients, and that are doing, you could say the maintenance, wellness care, however you want to frame that those patients are asking, when can I come back in, versus like you chasing them down and trying to get them back in. However, I want to link that into why we're actually even on this call today. I mean, and this interview is because when I saw what you and CLA have thrown together, and I shouldn't say thrown because it clearly is, it's not something you just throw together. It's an incredible resource. And I think that every doctor, especially as the lights come back on, as we kind of start stepping back into our business. I mean, what is it, like Saskatchewan's opening up again, New Brunswick. I read in the Globe and Mail that chiropractors, dentists, like they'll be the first ones that are going to be opening. Texas is coming back on. I mean, so
Michigan as well.
Michigan as well. Wow. Michigan. I'm surprised with that. But so this is actually a guide moving from today and, like this week forward. And we, you've positioned it as this Thrival kit, this Thrival guide. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, so people who are grabbing this guide, and by the way, it's completely free. It's just, an incredible resource for them to reconnect with their patients. And I'll use your word inside of the guide. I've checked it out. So tell me a little bit about some of the resources that the docs are getting inside.
Well, I think the very first thing is just the title is Thrival versus Survival. We chose that. And again, there's full recognition that there's big stuff going on. And one of the things that, when we train our CLA docs, but when I was teaching a lot of this to young and mentoring younger docs, I recognized that there was something called a 3R methodology. And I put that into this Thrival guide. And when we build care plans, we try and move away from the principle of relief, which is really limited. We recognize it's there, but move the conversation to release. And from release, we then challenge them to reorganize. And then finally, we talk about revitalization. So on a patient level, that's something we've been very familiar with CLA-wise in my own personal world, to use those 3 R's, which are release, reorganize, and revitalize. And so when we're talking about a Thrival guide, this is what really matters. And I'm really proud of it. You said sort of threw it together. Well, we did. Normally we would take a long time to, put everything together, but this was put together literally in hours and overnight, if you would. And I'm so proud of the team that I have that can work with me to put this forward. The release is really a conversation that, and I get right to the point, is that the biggest challenge for chiropractors to get into their rhythms again isn't because patients aren't going to want to see them. It's because they didn't manage their financial, conversations with themselves. And so I call those the financial potholes. And if there's anything anybody should be taking away from this, whether you're super successful or down at the starting end of things, you should be aware of the financial potholes that are there. And I offer some great solutions that I've learned over the time of everything from, watching that you're not dependent upon insurance only, having a long-term product model, taking a reality check and making sure that, if re-exams are what you're so skilled at and or what are going to continue, why would you ever give them away? Having family care plans. And so I go through I go through 10 top tips of what I've learned over the course of time are what you should be aware to release yourself from those habits and find your path through it.
I mean, I'm looking at it right now. So that's why it's like, it's so good. There's some really good resources in here, especially when it comes to, you talk about release, what we just talked about, the releasing the deadly practical financial habits as well. And something that I think a lot of doctors, especially moving forward, are really concerned about. And, the critical shift. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the reorganize then, like the critical shift that the doctors are going to be needing to make in the next 6 to 8 weeks?
Yeah, and I tried to make the Thrival Guide really practical for this time in the world, where it is. And so, the critical shift is really, and I've taught this over the years, but the critical shift is not, and gosh, we could talk about this, simply a pivot point, but it's really a shift in the consciousness. And this is your best time to do it. The world is absolutely focused on the reality that they have to shift away from this dominance and idea that, Big Brother is going to care for them. They have to take this idea of moving from a painful, symptom management way of managing their health to a purposeful management and potential. So what we talk about is really practical solutions, like scheduling. You have to make time for when these people have to have their story heard. When they come back in your office, reorganizing your schedule is going to be paramount because you want them to know that you've got a big ear for what they've been going through. Honestly, everybody has their stories. I mean, most of it will be boredom. I'm like so, stressed because I'm so bored, but other people have been going through huge traumas in their life, the loss of parents, the loss of grandparents, things of that nature. If you want to become that community advisor, if you want to become that trusted advisor, the one that you always were trained to be and you dreamed of being, this is your chance to give yourself just a little more time to empathize with them, to help them understand that you're the big ear listening to them. The other part of it is, this is your golden time. There is, in any good clinical practice, Dr. Ed, I don't care whether you're pain-based or purpose-based or anything else, we all know that after trauma, we're supposed to be relating to, a re-exam to look at what traumas have hit upon us. And one of the things that we know is that these people have been in some way shifted or traumatized at some level. And so what we definitely want to do is organize their thinking around this idea of re-examining, understand where their stress has settled in on their system. Now, when you use our technology, that's really easy to look at it. But even if you don't have our technology right now, one of the greatest things that we know is that you can go and help people really understand that stress feels differently. And whether you're palpating or measuring with the insight, you can draw the conversation of stress and re-examinations forward. And the final part of reorganization, I don't know about final, but one of them is, this is your time to really be seen as a community advisor, but a family advisor. Get them to have their family checked. This is not the right time to focus on their symptoms. It's the time for them to see how they can be leaders themselves.
Well, I mean, I had, insight technology in my practice. So like and we had a, fairly large, family pediatric practice, sure. But I mean, I would be focusing right now on, they talk about what do they talk about? It's like the invisible enemy, right? And like, to use those terms, I mean, how can you measure the stress and on the nervous system of like a child, right? They may not even be able to verbalize it, but I mean, using the scanning technology with, other, objective testing, but I would be using it to have, I would probably do a reassessment on pretty much everyone right away.
That's right. And you know, the medical world has been caught up in trying to treat to the symptom, treat to the disease.
Yeah.
And everybody is aware that that exists, but not a lot of people are aware of how powerful chiropractic is for looking to where the stress is staining the nervous system. And so, you know, when you use technologies that look deeper, you can literally help them see images of what the stress is doing to their nervous system and spine. You can, you know, we built it so that you can actually have a scoring system so that they have a tracking mechanism. And I know that seems kind of like salesmanshipy at this moment, but it's not. This is this idea of tell, don't sell. Let them know how committed you are to being, you know, to being there for them at this time of the greatest need. I'm super excited for the chiropractic profession as a whole. If we get it right and we stop trying to be, you know, this subsystem of medicine, which is really just a, you know, an advanced physiotherapy model, doesn't mean we can't power up and get people who have, you know, significant back spine issues on track. But when that goes through the system and they get better, now's your chance. Well, now's the chance right in society to be seen as the person who has the tools, who has the ability to take next steps.
What do you see like is going to, like, what, if you had a crystal ball right now in the next 4 weeks, what do you see for practices, you know, whether it's in the States or Canada? What would you predict?
I think that it's going to be awkward. My crystal ball is pretty, you know, clear, is that there's going to be social distancing in the practices. There's going to be some weird masking and, you know, and physical differentiating, and that too will pass. And so in the next 4 weeks, I think that every chiropractor needs to be doing a couple of standard things. And that's number one, getting their message straight, meaning they have to do some inward looking and clear thinking on their side. Chances are many of them have either laid off or furloughed their staff. And so they need to be reaching out and connecting with their staff about how they're going to build a team message. In the next 4 weeks, they're going to be reactivating their current patients, but I predict that there are going to be a tremendous number of patients that have discontinued care searching back. And so I think that one of the things that people have to understand is that they better be prepared for a reactivation model, okay? Yeah. And, you know, the reactivation model, and this is my humble opinion, should have a vision. Forget about practice management or selling visits and packages and everything else. I think that they should have a future forward concept built into their communication, talking about, you know, what you should have learned right now is the importance of your preparation, of preparing your immune system, of preparing your nervous system to be stronger, healthier, and more capable in all facets of it. And let me show you how we can support that. And, you know, I'm really, and oh, by the way, in that guide, we actually have an entire script section of where we have, I've written down scripts that are for our, for anybody who gets the Thrival Guide, of communications that they should be planning on having in those next 4 weeks. So prepping up.
Yeah. I mean, like you've basically made it very simple, step by step. Here's the scripts. Yeah. Here's exactly how to do it. Here's the conversations that that you're going to need to have, the vital conversations. And there's going to be a lot of questions, I imagine, patients practice members are going to be having when they come up or when they do come back. And I imagine part of the scripts are going to be answering that. And that's part of the reconnect and the retain scripting really is to answer those questions right before they even maybe ask them.
You know, I think that what I've learned, you know, not through this situational time, but also in my years in practice is, you know, have something to hold you to this organized approach, you know, whether it's just having in your mind the sequence of RRR, you know, which is, you know, in communicating to your patients, listen, we need to release the tension that this terrible time in history has thrown on your nervous system. Then we need to reorganize a lot of your habits. You know, maybe you've taken on some good habits. Let's keep reorganizing around those. But, you know, you probably found out there are things that aren't as good for you, and let's address those. And finally, why don't we talk about that third part, which is revitalization, which in the guide, we talk about revitalizing your message. Like that's the whole idea here is what you said, the crystal ball. This whole idea of having this visionary approach as to where you see your practice and where you see yourself, that comes up in your branding. It comes up in your Facebook Lives that you're going to be doing. It's going to come up in whatever paid ads you're doing. You know, you need to market to the visionary approach that you see your strength is. And so in one of the sections, the third R is revitalization. There's a beautiful pyramidal approach as to how you really, strengthen your brand coming out of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that moving forward. What patients are going to, I don't know if it's like what they need, right? What is the saying? Like, you give them what they want and then give them what they need, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
what they need is going to may be different than what, pre-COVID or I don't know what we're going to end up calling this era, but it's going to be a completely different conversation. Like, I was on a call with a doctor yesterday, and he was surprised how many people, like especially patients that are connecting with him, and it's a lot to do with mindset. And then there's things that they were like, we all knew that they should be doing these things, and we kind of guided them. But I think now there's going to be a big part of what we do as chiropractors in terms of being like a coach for our patients moving forward as well.
Yeah, and I think that at a societal level, I mean, we were deemed essential in virtually everywhere. And I think we need to draw upon that. And I think that, so often the mindset of chiropractors is that, we're sort of the redheaded bastard stepchildren in the healthcare system. And we need to shift our own perception. We need to realize that the public and even the relationship of lawmakers and otherwise see us as an essential service. And we need to push on that. We need to really, and I'm not talking about branding ourselves around that. We need to raise our own level of understanding of the public's perception of us is that we are essential. And this is a chance. We see far too few percentiles of people in society, yet at the same time, we're still viewed as an essential service. We're not bit players in the minds of lawmakers and otherwise. So let's really capitalize on that and bring this message that I think is hugely powerful up to them and be strong. I can't overemphasize the opportunity that I see coming out of this. And, I'm not just, look, as I said, as we began this, there's fearlessness and there's optimism. I mean, a lot of stuff scares the crap out of you, if you let it. And I just need chiropractors to know it's going to be okay. And I mean that in the best of ways. I know chiropractic, has its rough edges and has its splits, and there's people that would rather see us in this direction than in this direction. But the truth is, the public wants chiropractic, and now is your chance to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, because this is also, I know we are live right now, but this will be coming out as a TCP podcast, an audio podcast. I'm just going to drop a little bit of advice for everyone who's listening. So, listeners, you can head to thechiropracticphilanthropist.com. And actually, we are completely revising and revitalizing our website. Yeah. So we have a new website. We'll have a page featuring our discussion with Dr. David Fletcher today. We're going to have a link and all the resources, including for the Thrival Kit, the Thrival Guide. I'm going to call it the Thrival Guide and keep it consistent. Incredible resource. Again, like I said, I'm looking at it right now. And the downloads alone, not the videos, like including the videos, it's really well packaged. Great job. And this is going to be incredibly valuable and help a lot of doctors moving forward who are asking the question of like, okay, what next? So as we kind of wrap up the discussion today, I'm going to actually do a couple things that we always do on the TCP podcast. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay.
So I'm going to put you in the TCP time machine. Now, okay. This is a little different though than the last time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in the TCP time machine. I'm going to send you back to kind of a younger version of yourself, to December of 2019. So just before all of this went down. Yeah. You're not allowed to sell all your stock. Okay. That's not the answer.
No.
So just, like we take you back a couple months, you have all the experience that you have now, all the knowledge you have right now. You went back like 2 months, 3 months or whatever, and you see that younger self. What would you say to that person in December of 2019?
Well, buy puts on Amazon for sure, but that's the first thing I would have done. But what I would really say to that person is, I think that in December 2019, there was this sense that nothing could derail the economy and derail what was going on. I think there was always that bear that was growling. But I think that if I could look back, I'd say, look around you. In reality, there are cracks in the system that you should be preparing for. And not a doomsday, or I don't think anybody saw the COVID coming down the pike, but I'm just saying this roaring bull, and I know I'm talking stocks here, but I'm talking the economies and the rest of it had a lot of bubblicious in it. There was something that was going to be happening. And whether it was going to come down in March of 2020 or otherwise, I think everybody should have gone and said to themselves, nothing this good can last forever. And whether it was a virus that was going to take it out, or a presidential election, or who knows what in the European side, I think I would talk to myself and go, you know what, when your spider senses are talking to you, listen.
Yeah.
That's what I would have said.
Good advice. I like it. I mean, it's all about, preparation, isn't it? And I don't mean to be, again, like a doomsday, like you're saying, like the doomsday, but I mean, it is, it's about preparation and just knowing the realities of what can happen, and, making sure that you're protecting yourself, your family, your business. And, okay.
I think intentionally understanding and trusting your gut. I think that, and this goes right down to when you're having conversations with people, or, we are so skilled and we don't give ourselves credit. We meaning chiropractors especially, but, small business owners and otherwise, we've taken so many risks to get to where we are, that we have in our DNA imprinted this reality that says we're smart and we're wise. Yeah. And as a result of that, so often the trouble we get into is that we just don't listen to our innate. And this is the harsh reality. And if there's anybody on the planet that has that figured out, it should be a chiropractor.
Yeah. I love when you say the word risk as well, because that's what we're really great. I mean, that's where I see like the most successful people in the world are the ones who take the most risk.
Yep.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. And so I'm going to end just wrap up the podcast today with a resource. Now, we talked about the Thrival Guide. So everyone is going to get a link to the Thrival Guide. But if you had another resource you could drop, so whether it's something you're listening to, something you're reading, could be a person you're following, whatever you think that docs should go out and start consuming.
Well, I think they should all listen to you, but and that's under the hood here. Listen, I've had a tremendous amount. I don't know if anybody else is finding this, but with all this time that we have, supposedly, we're all supposed to be, diving into our libraries and reading. I'm finding the concentration factor to be an issue. I normally can dig through books and everything else. I'm finding that I'm getting more out of podcasts, and I'm getting really interested in it. So I have a favorite podcast, and I don't know if you're there, but I've been listening to. It's called Mind Your Business, and interesting, James Wedmore. And it's a Mind Your Business podcast. And truthfully, it's a mindfulness in small business. And so although there's some really practical online, conversations that go about how building your business is there, it's really cool because Wedmore really focuses primarily on that mindset issue that you talked about, which is getting clear. And he's got a huge following. So obviously it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I did a little bit of his. Like he did a free challenge or something like last year. I'm like, wow. And it was more like also just, again, that mindset component. He's very personable. He's really great. Yeah. So, all right, listeners. So go ahead and check out that podcast. Again, we're going to have a webpage dedicated to our discussion today, and head over to thechiropracticphilanthropist.com. Dr. Fletcher, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. Always bring it.
Honestly, it's one of my highlights is getting a chance to have a chat like this with you.
Well, here's a fact, by the way, is like whenever we look at the stats for the highest downloaded episodes of any guest, 360 some guests, your episode is one of the top 5 always. I can't remember which one, but one of them is the top 5.
Oh my goodness. Great. Well, that speaks loudly to the guy that was interviewing me. So thank you.
All right. Well, you have an amazing afternoon. I think it's in Toronto right now. So have an amazing afternoon. Thank you so much for giving back. Really appreciate it, Doc.
Well, this is based on philanthropy, and more importantly, thanks for inviting me, and we'll do it all together.
So you've heard the struggles, you've heard the successes, and this episode is done. But there's still so much more to come and so much more to learn. Head on over to thechiropracticphilanthropist.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive free practice building tips and strategies, including how to market your practice with your very own podcast and so much more. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Chiropractic Philanthropist.